a lot of the things that I encounter when it comes to this conflict is a lot of, as you said earlier on the show, fam, people just don't really have the facts. They have a lot of actual misinformation, a lot of propaganda, especially if they've grown up as Jews. And a lot of our Jewish friends and a lot of people have talked about this, about how they grew up, being Jewish, and they saw through the light, and they educated themselves. But there are people that didn't, and they're in the United States. It's not like the education is great. You kind of have to go looking for it if you actually want to be educated well in any sort of foreign policy. And the vast majority of schools that are deemed great give you BS realities on foreign policy, very Western centric, very false, and very weak. But there are people that are lucky enough to see through this. And one of the things that I get tired of hearing from people, and you might disagree with this, but I get tired of hearing, and I specifically hear this from the people that focus on Hamas, this conflict is extremely complicated. This is a very complex conflict. It's been so long, and there's so many things that go into this, blah, 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 religion. And I'm just like, no, this is not a complex conflict. This is actually a very simple conflict at this point in the game. It is very, very simple. There is a genocide being committed on Palestinians. Whether or not you like Hamas or you agree with how militant they are is irrelevant. What is being done to Palestinians and has been done since the beginning wasn't fair. And people need to recognize that what was done isn't fair. And it created a sequence of events that led to where we're at today. Just the same way that a sequence of events led to the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or the special military operation in Ukraine. You can't say this conflict happened, who started it? It was Hamas, right? You shouldn't start something you can't finish. I mean, I'm just telling you what I get, especially online. Well, this didn't start on October 7th. It started a really long time ago. Even before the 75 years, when Britain and the United States pushed themselves in and decided to push the Israelis to push the Palestinians out of their land, said, hey, we'll give you this land that they had zero authority to give away. And so the Israelis came in there and they took this land from the Palestinians. And then everything else that has happened since then is why we're here today. So there's a video from this woman, and it's kind of a long video, fam, but we can talk about it. I know you've seen it.
Yeah, it's a good video. It gives a lot of information. Let's go full screen on it again, too. I have to get my power cord, but I watched it yesterday. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and play it, and yeah, full screen, Cheese Slice.
Okay, it feels important to say this. I am not pulling my perspective on Israel-Palestine out of my ass, okay? I'm not just guessing that Israel is committing a genocide against Palestine. I have studied and researched this. I have bona fides, and I will share them. First of all, I'm a Jewish woman. I was raised by a Zionist family. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. My family talks about our spirit of resistance and resilience constantly. Desiring goodness from the nation of Israel is in my blood, and still, I can see that the Zionist state is vicious, violent, and evil. If someone who is raised by a Zionist family, by people who believe that Israel has the right to exist and that it is our salvation, if I can overcome my pro-Israel bias and learn about this conflict, so can you. And frankly, I should not be calling it a conflict, it's a genocide. So when I was in college around 2012, 2013, a bunch of my friends and loved ones started going on birthright trips. And I knew enough then to ask the question when they got back from their birthright trips, what about Palestine? And when these people I love, admire, and respect started talking about Palestinians and using language like terrorists, I knew I had to learn more. I also knew that I wanted to go on birthright, and I was nervous about being brainwashed by the trip, and I should have been nervous. So before I went on birthright, I decided at my small liberal arts school in Massachusetts to get a well-rounded perspective, educational perspective on Israeli-Palestinian politics. I took 4 courses: Suffering and Evil in the Jewish Tradition, the Jewish Experience, Middle East Politics, and Arab-Israeli Conflict. I also took international and comparative politics courses that often brought up Israel and Palestine in comparisons to, for example, apartheid South Africa. And by the time I finished my ample coursework on the subject before I went on birthright, I was already pro-Palestine. Because once you are in the literature, once you are in the research, not the media stories about this, not the pro-Zionist rigmarole on CNN and MSNBC, once you are in the literature and the data, this isn't a debate. This isn't a question. People talk about Israel-Palestine like it is incredibly complicated, and I reject that premise. It is not. We know that anti-Semitism exists globally, right? We know that Jews are not the most beloved population in the world. We know that Britain has a colonial history and they have taken on colonial projects even through the 20th and 21st centuries. Essentially, Britain already wanted to colonize Palestine. So did the United States. And at the end of World War II, Britain and the US got to talking and they thought, who do we want to exploit for military labor someplace that is surrounded by brown people so that we can rape and pillage land that we don't currently have access to? Where's one part of the globe we haven't effectively colonized yet? And there was Palestine. And Britain had been trying to colonize Palestine already. And so this was passed off to Jews who had just survived the Holocaust as a gift. Here we're granting you this parcel of land so that you and your progeny can exist in peace and not be violated anymore. Congratulations. Except that land already belonged to someone. Palestinians were already living there. And the US and Britain didn't give a shit about the well-being of Jews. They didn't care. This wasn't a gift for Jews. This was always intended to be a trap of, you do our military labor for us. We'll put you here and we'll grant you this parcel of land that already belongs to someone that there are already people on. And in return, you will rape and pillage that land for us and we'll just all share in the wealth. And it might be a good idea too, if like your entire population were to, have conscripted military service so you can really defend that land that is yours, totally yours, bucko. And if you see who has emerged as the political leadership of Israel over the last few generations, this won't surprise you. This insidiousness will not surprise you. This is how you get Benjamin Netanyahu, someone who absolutely agrees to the premise of Israel as a Zionist ethno-nationalist state, who says, we are here for one thing and one thing only, is to garner as much wealth from this earth that we have, as much tourist property from this plot of land, convert it to dollars, and build up a military so mighty, a military apparatus so great that we wind up producing the world's weaponry. Yes, we have mined this land, and we have used the land to give you war machinery so that we can all murder each other 1,000 times over. And to the people already living here, well, we'll murder them too. I took basically a semester and a half of college courses on this. And I know in my bones that what Israel is doing right now is a genocide. It's evil. What they've been doing for the last 75 years is a genocide. It is drip violence, slow violence, protracted harm. It is meant to exhaust the civilian population of Palestine. It is meant to exhaust all Palestinians out of their will to fight. And all the benefit, the wealth garnered from that land goes to the primary stakeholders, not the Palestinian people to whom the land originally belonged.
All right, so Fiorella, we lost her for a second. She should be back in a second to talk about that. A very interesting video, and I really wanted to hear Fee's opinions about it outside the gate, because there is one point of pushback, and that is the actual why. You know what I'm saying? That woman was spitting a lot of facts of what had gone on. Even her rationale for saying why it's not complicated and why it's not an easy decision and Israel is doing this and yada, yada, yada. I wouldn't disagree with that. I would disagree maybe with the why, right? I mean, there's a video out there from Lord Rothschilds in the 1914s and them talking about him and getting his Zionist state. So the whys might be a little bit different. We can talk about those. But we want to get Fee's opinion on this coming in, because she had a really important point to make on this. But I don't know what you guys all thought about this. Like I said, I would question the whys. I'm going to, not on today's show, I'm not going to play the Lord Rothschilds. But if you look up Lord Rothschild and Zionism, there's a 6-minute clip of an interview, and it's about a famous letter that's written by the Queen to Lord Rothschild. And it was in 1917. So they were close to pushing the Zionist nation upon the mindset of the parliament and getting them to understand and loosening them up. There were globalists behind the scenes back in the days pushing for a greater Zionist country. There was talks about it being in other places and whatnot. Yeah. England is basically sold to the Palestinians, to the Rothschilds, pretty much is what it is. What's in that interview. It's very genius. You got to check it on out. So the why, is it to set up just a military spot? Because she did say it was about brown people there and where can we colonize and where can we have wars? And, it wasn't, it looked like an area where they can get in there and make a lot of money and extract a lot of resources. Oil was there. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they wanted to control a lot of the energy, the world's energy, and they knew a lot of it coming out of there. I always believe at the end of the day, resource extraction is one of the biggest things. As we are winding down some of these wars in the Middle East, and we can see Iran coming together with Saudi Arabia, and this situation hitting its peak, about to play out, and a lot of these other countries, these Gulf monarchies that will not be pushed around, they'll not be told what to do. They understand there's another game in town other than the Americans, and they're looking at the Chinese and they're looking at the Russians. We're going to start going for where the raw materials are, the mining materials of the fourth industrial revolution, the nickel, the cobalt, all that stuff is going to be the next hot commodity. So look for wars to start over there. Look for wars to start inside Africa, which right now they are starting to draw lines in the sand. And that's all about the resources. They want those resources. So, I always believe it's a fight for resources. It's a fight for real estate. That's why the complication of what's going on right now, there is some form of complication right now. I want to say complication. And it's when this woman said it's not that complicated, this is real racism going on. This is real racism that's happening with the Gaza and Israeli situation. So that is coming to light. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. So I don't want to downplay the whole thought process of when she mentioned brown people, but I think it's a little bit more complex than that, So that's what I have to say. That. Can you imagine if the energy of that land after what the Zionists have done to it, it's going to be terrible. There's going to be demons and dead, Mima, like the USA after genocide of the indigenous. Hey, that's the land we're living on right now. Everybody who lives here looks like me. The majority of people look like me. They weren't looking like me when we first got here. So it's scary, and is this another just genocide that's playing out that it's going to happen and we're going to go on with our lives? Can you imagine how life was like? All the settlers came here to the States. They took this area. They pretty much wiped out a species and life went on. It advanced, and right now, I see American life, fantasy football still going. What are people talking about? They're not talking about Gaza and Israel enough. Most of the people talking about, did you see the Celtics beat the Knicks on opening night 2 days ago? Oh my God, the Lakers. And, breads and circuses, they're still going to them on a regular basis. That hasn't stopped in the United States, despite a real genocide taking place. So that's kind of crazy. That's it. Do we have any super chats or super rays? Anything to read? Rob McMurtry. And here she is. Thank you so much for the super ray, Rob McMurtry. Fam, as we bring her back on in, this should prepare the ground of understanding for peace talks to occur. Thich Nhat Hanh, MLK's Peace Prize nominee, we recommended that the Palestinians and the Israelis talk about their suffering, fears, and despair in a public forum that the world could hear. We can listen without judging. That's interesting. Without condemning, in order to understand the experience of both sides. This would prepare the ground for understanding for peace talks. Now, go back to 1-1 real quick, because I want to. We bring Fam in here. Come in here, Fam. Super card. This is Thich Nhat Hanh, which is MLK's Peace Prize nominee. We recommend that the Palestinians and the Israelis talk about their suffering, fears, and despair in a public forum that all the world could hear. We can listen without judging, without condemning, in order to understand the experience of both sides, fam. And the last part, This would prepare us for the ground of understanding for peace talks to occur. Fam, your thoughts on that, and you can jump into the women's comments. And I said I agreed with most of it. Obviously, a lot of the stuff she was spitting out was very true. The why, her theory on the why. There are brown people here that need to be colonized so we can have a war machine going. I don't know if I necessarily 100% believe with that. All the other stuff she was spinning was facts, but that theory, because there is a Lord, and there's a Lord Rothschild video out there where the Queen was pretty much saying in 1917, we're going to give you, a Zionist state. And I've always believed that a lot of the resources, the oil that was there, was always a big reason why we wanted to go, because we want to control the majority of the world's energy and make people dependent and go through us. And like now we're looking for the fourth industrial revolution, those resources that people want. That's where the new wars will be, Africa and back to parts of South and Central America. But your thoughts, fam, go right ahead. Dive into it. I've been speaking for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. So first, let me address what this person said. I don't agree with that because we're past that point. Like what Israel is doing is genocide, and it's not unequal both sides. So they don't want peace. They literally have said, and the last video that I have, I think, right, is going to show why this isn't possible.
You're addressing the super chat.
Yeah, I'm addressing the super chat. Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you said to address the super chat first, so I'm addressing the super chat. And so I just don't agree with that because they literally don't want to. They want to exterminate Palestinians, and I'm not saying it's every single Israeli, but it's the government, and it's a lot of people who have. If you haven't seen the TikTok videos, dancing, happy that this is happening, it's endless and endless and endless. This isn't well, let's just talk about it and stop and bring peace. This is much more the side that is doing all of the damage needs to recognize that they're doing all of the damage, and if they're not going to recognize that, they have to be forced to recognize that. And so I don't see a way where people are going to sit down, especially Palestinians that are having their entire families killed. A journalist just had his wife and children murdered, a journalist for Al Jazeera, and he had to go to work literally the next day. So I mean, this is just not equal. The other thing I want to address is the entirety of the colonized groups have always been mostly in the Middle East and in the global South, in Africa and Latin America. So even though talking about race makes people uncomfortable, there is an element of that to it. There is an element of that when Israel and others are talking about the savage Hamas Muslims. It may be more about resource extraction and about other things, but you can't deny that that element is there. And this woman was pointing out just a huge issue in terms of how the information is presented to kids who grow up, of course, being Jewish, and how you really have to seek the information out, and how once you understand that information, you really can't think a different way, because this is a very black and white issue. It's one of those rare moments where the issue is extremely black and white. The issue is what is being done is wrong, and there is a right way to do things, and that's it. And whether there would have been a way to do a two-state solution, or there's a way to do a one-state solution, you could argue about that, but you can't really argue about what happened, the facts, and what's being done now. So that's just my whole assessment as to what she said.
All right, we'll get into why not a two-state solution, right? Is that what? Let's get to that one.
Yeah.
Let's get that up. I gotta go grab my plug for my thing real quick, so I'm gonna step out. I don't want to have the same thing happen to me to happen.
Let's go full screen. Full screen. It just happened to him. Jamie, can you play the video?
לא נותרת אבן על אבן בעזה. עזה הופכת לדרזדן, כן, שריפה מוחלטת. כלו כל הקיצים, ואנחנו עדיין בראש של אוסלו, ועדיין מקישים בגג, הלילה עוד חיל האוויר הקיש בגג לפני שהקפיל מגדל, עלוב, בבית חולים, ליד בית החולים שיפה, במקום לשטח את כל עזה. אז כל ה-64 מנדטים שלך, בנימין נתניהו, צריכים עכשיו להפגין מול הבית שלך.
טוב, אנחנו נמשיך.
תשמיד את עזה עכשיו,
משה,
עכשיו.
אנחנו נמשיך.
לא נותרת אבן.
Okay. So this is why I don't think a two-state solution is possible, because this is how the majority of the Israeli government feels. Netanyahu is not the most right-wing politician, believe it or not. He's actually he's actually not the most. Naftali Bennett, I think, was worse in those terms. The majority of the Israeli politicians are like this. The majority of the Israeli population thinks that Hamas and by extension all Palestinians are terrorists. The majority of people I know who have very little political education and who have ties to Israel are all over social media spewing the same lies and everything that they've been saying. And let me repeat what he said. He said, we still have not revenged in a biblical way. We do not burn ashes. Immediately level the entire area. Do not leave a stone upon stone in Gaza. Annihilate Gaza now. Okay. So again, I this is precisely why I don't think a two-state solution is possible. And this is precisely why I don't think that we're going to see a sort of, well, we can have a, you know, UN type of situation where two sides sit at a table and they discuss. I think that will happen after Israel admits what it's doing, after the entire international community says what you've done is genocide, it is a war crime, it is absolutely unprecedented Holocaust of Semitic people. And I've said this before, it's a Holocaust of Semitic people. This is not any different. Palestinians are Semitic people. And it's not going to happen until some people within Israel do something about that themselves. So is there a possibility for a two-state solution? I don't think so at this point. And I know countries like Russia and China are pushing that. I know they're always going to push the side of the UN Charter. They're always going to push for diplomacy. But the reality is much different on the ground. Palestinians, I don't think, are going to be felt like they're okay if Israel continues to exist with this hatred that they have against them, where they want to eliminate them. You can't coexist with that. We should have learned that a long time ago with apartheid South Africa. And apparently we didn't learn, because we're still trying to argue that we can coexist with a state that literally wants to kill or thinks people are less than human across, you know, a few kilometers over there. It's just, you can't coexist with that. So that's my whole
well, what about for those
that.
people who were pushing back against the Netanyahu government, the more of the leftist centrist type that are inside of Israel? And listen, I'm not saying this because I believe this. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Even Norman Finkelstein said the people who are kind of residing in Israel today are a lot different than they were 30, 40 years ago, where it seemed there was more compassion in trying to give peace a chance. Now it's just, you know, and this is something that Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen have showed in their movies as well. When they did Killing Gaza, this kind of just disdain, disgust for their Arabs there in that who are living there, and showing that. And in fact, even pointing out the fact that even after the ceasefire was called, it was a lot of the citizens' thirst for blood and why they continued to bomb the residential areas within Gaza City. But what about those other people out there who do push back, like, you know, the more moderate to leftist type of Israeli citizens that would take the 1967 borders and be cool with it?
But the other people would still exist. The other people would still be there. Right? I mean, how long did it take? How long did it take? Well, how long did it take South Africa? I mean, this is the reason I point that out is because we've had this happen before. How long did it take them to root that out, to like get rid of that? How long has it taken people to, you know, rooted out in terms of the Holocaust, in terms of what happened to Jews. I mean, Netanyahu sounds more like Adolf Hitler every day when he talks about Palestinians, when he talks about the right of Israeli people. It doesn't matter what religion you have. If you put yourself above everybody else, that is a fascistic type of belief that cannot coexist with people who just want to coexist, right? So I don't really understand how that is possible. You have to have both the international community, the people that you say right now, the Israelis that are in there, you have to have them actually strongly rise up. What you have now is they're fighting because Netanyahu isn't right-wing enough.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand how we're gonna get there. Yeah.
And Americans are being censored and blackballed for not endorsing the murderous gibberish. And yeah, it's kind of crazy, like we talked about in the beginning of the show, the way people who are for freedom are pushing back against freedom and wanting people censored. Like literally the answer I got, I'm just pushing back against terrorism. No.
Right.
That's what people saying certain speech is hate speech. Therefore, they can just demonetize it and silence it because they said it was hate. That's all it is. It's a mechanism. You got to think more nuancedly than that. And you're not helping yourself by saying that.